Welcome back to the Soul Report Show. Here we are with T Love, who's explaining her experiences of her therapeutic healing she calls Reiki and beyond. And as we were just talking before the break, you were talking about this source of energy coming from within or the heart. So, what do you do to say people? I know people are going to be skeptical. They're going to come in and say, "I heard really good things, but can you do me? I got a really bad problem. I don't know if you can help me." What do you say to those people?
I say, I don't know. Let's see. And when people say to me, well, it's the truth. You don't know. I don't know their journey. And I tell them that I don't know your journey. I don't even know my journey. I just know what I'm doing right now. So let's see what happens, how you react. And I have people who will say, well, why couldn't you cure them? That's not my job. And sometimes the healing is in the person passing. It's not staying here. And people, when you explain that to people, they kind of understand it, even though they don't like it. I do a lot of volunteer work for pediatric hospice. It's very difficult, but it's probably the most rewarding thing that I do because you're
Wow.
with this child, but you're there for the family. The child knows. They know what's going on. Those kids are smart. I mean, I've had
Mm.
kids say to me, I'm going to go meet Jesus. And I've said, yes, I know. And they've said, you do? And I say, yeah, I do. And you can't lie to them, but the family's in, denial.
Yeah.
So when someone says, can you heal me? I say, I don't know. I'm not healing you. I'm sending energy. It's your higher self that knows what to do with that energy for the highest good of you and your journey. But I don't know your journey, and nor do you. So I have to be honest with people because people, why doesn't penicillin work on everyone? Why doesn't chemo and radiation work on everyone? It's the same thing. We don't know everybody's journey. We're not even privy to our own journey.
Well, you're right about that, I think. Everybody has their own destiny. Some people live short lifetimes and some have long lifetimes. And of course, the rest of us are in the middle. But you went over the idea of that you're there at the time of children passing. And I'm of the opinion that children came into the world, so their memory of the pre-existence is a little more profound than people like us who are a little bit down the path, and we've sort of forgotten that that doorway we came in is waiting for us to go out again in the post-existence. And I've had that experience too, where children have known what was going to happen to them. Also, adults, people who are not well, and certainly people who want to pass over. They've had it. This has been a really hard journey for them, emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, and they're tired. And so they lose the will and they want to go home. And of course, we understand that intellectually. And everybody, I'm not afraid to die. I believe. Yeah, but I'm afraid how I'm going to die. That's the problem. I'm
That's
afraid.
true.
So,
That's
you know, so getting on the other side, the journey is the fear. But the point being is you're there with children. And I've had experiences with my children, and I've lost a daughter. But the point being is that that's an amazing, um, I don't want to call it occupation, but service might be a better word, where you're there with the children and they know. And they're ready, like they say that I'm going to meet Jesus. The angels come to visit them, and prior to whatever, and they assure the child everything's going to be okay. I've had clients tell me that as well. But what do? You're in between the parents who are grieving. They're angry at God. They're in denial. This can't be. They get frustrated with the nurses and doctors, and you're there, like sort of the referee, right? You're juggling all these emotions. Tell us about that.
It can be very difficult. I try to keep my attention on the children and talking to them. And I remember one little boy when he said, I'm going to meet Jesus. And I said, yeah, I know. And then he said to me, do you want me to give him a message? And I almost wanted to laugh. And I thought, and I said, okay, just tell him, hey, thank you. I mean, I didn't know what to say. And when I remember when the first child passed, there were a lot of people in the room and they started to leave the room. And there was something going on. I couldn't put my finger on what this emotion is until finally I realized it's guilt. They're all feeling guilt. Something's going on. So I went and talked to an aunt and I asked her, why do people feel guilty? And she said, because the child passed. And I said, I don't think that's it. I think they feel guilty because there's a relief that the child's not suffering anymore, but they don't want to own that because that means it's okay that the child passed. So they're feeling bad. I think they need to understand that they can grieve, but understand that you don't have to feel guilt is not the right thing. This child we knew was going to pass, people we know are going to pass. So instead of feeling guilty about it, just feel, sorrowful and don't feel like you did anything because they're taking it like their own, like a hit. They're taking it as I feel guilty because I feel relief. You're not feeling relief that they passed, you're feeling relief that they're not suffering anymore. There's a huge difference between the two.
Very
And
well said. Yes, that's the confusion. That's very well said. I mean, people have survivor's guilt. We understand that when you lose a spouse, but it's not supposed to happen to children. Your children are not
right,
supposed to go before you.
yeah,
So this idea that uh, they're relieved that the child is not suffering anymore, they don't know how to handle that.
right,
They don't have someone like you that they can go and express themselves to, or you to be aware of it and say, just a minute, celebrate this. The child has gone home. They came, they've accomplished whatever, but just because you're alive and nothing else could be done, you shouldn't feel bad, or whatever they are. So
right.
that's an amazing observation and something for our audience to pay attention to. I never quite put it together like that, but I can understand it. So what
Yeah.
happens? What happens after that? They come back to you, and after you spoke to the nun, that sounds like very good wisdom to have expressed. Somebody, of course, who's in the spiritual world and dealing with life and death. But elaborate on that a little, if you will.
I just picked the person out of the crowd that seemed to be the one that could handle the information, and I spoke to her. She went back and spoke to the family, which
Uh,
was great, because my job at that point is done and I need to extricate myself from the situation and move on. But I didn't, it was the first time and I just didn't understand what these people were feeling. And I had to sit there for a while with it in order to get it. And then I wanted to speak to someone. And of course, there was a lot going on in the room and everything. And it seemed longer than I'm sure it was because things happened quickly at that point.
right.
So rather quickly, probably I was able to speak with her and then she spoke with the family. And then afterward, I did get calls from family members who wanted to talk or come in, but a lot of my work I do is distant. It's over the phone or it's over Zoom. So people can get help that way as well. They don't have to wait, until they're in the area, say. And if it's something like that you're helping a family and they're in New York, which is where I went, and I'm in New Jersey, they would either drive here or would do something over the phone at the time, in
So on
case.
that note, tell us how can people find you? Website, email, phone number? How do they get a hold of you?
Website's easiest. It's quantumwellness.org, O-R-G. And then there's the site for Soji Huggles Children's Foundation is sojikids.org. And that's the easiest way to get me. You can read all about things. You can read testimonials and see what people have said. Because as I said, there's a lot of things that I consider miracles that happened, but it wasn't because of me. It was just through the energy and them. And I tell people we're working as a team. You have to participate in this too. You can't just lay there and think, oh, she's going to heal me. That's great. But just intend and see yourself as fully healed. That helps with the energy. And so, you can do that easily over a Zoom situation or over the telephone, and it helps.
Well, it's amazing. Tell us, have you ever seen something in a room? Have you ever seen an angel appear? Have you had any apparitions of anything like that? I mean, let's get down to the nitty gritty. What have you seen?
Well, even when I was little, I saw things. So, I guess I was on my way to do this, only I never knew it. I didn't understand that a spiritual type of life would be something that I would do. But yes, there was a woman who came in and we both knew that she was not going to get out of her stomach cancer. We both knew that. She did go into remission at one point, and that was great. But when she came back in about a month and a half later, and she said to me, "Who are the three people in the corner?" And I looked at her and I said, "What three people?" And she told me
Wow.
she saw like three Indian people. And that's when I knew she's vacillating. She's going back and forth. She's determining if she wants to stay here or not. And I had a child who had cancer, and she came in with her mom. And as I was working on her, she kept saying, Nona, Nona. And I said, yep. And the mother's in the room because when it's a child, I want the mother in the room as well, or the parent, caretaker, whoever. And she said, that's her grandmother. And I said, yeah, I know, she's standing over there. And I realized, oh.
Ah, spilled the beans. There we go.
And she looked at me and she goes, she's standing over there. I said, well, she was a minute ago. Sorry. She says, you could see her. I said, yeah, I knew what your daughter was talking about. She's right there. She's watching over to make sure that I'm not hurting her granddaughter. I understand it completely.
Yes.
And the woman was floored. I mean, she couldn't believe it. I had another woman come in who I did not know her mother had passed at all. And first time in, and she's laying on the table and I'm working on her, and I know that there's a woman there. And so I'm working on her. And when I was finished, I said, how do you feel? And she said, I felt like, somebody was here, like right there on that side of the table. I felt like there was a person there. I said, yeah, she was. That was your mom. And then I looked at her and I went, I'm sorry, is your mom passed? I couldn't believe the words came out of my mouth. And she said, yeah, she passed 3 months ago. And I said, well,
Mhm.
she was here. So things do, and I get messages too that I don't, I mean, you can't not give the message. You can't not tell the person what you got because somehow it just comes out of your mouth. You have no control. So this one person, her husband had passed away, and the message I got while I was working on her was there was a racetrack with a red car. Okay, I don't know what that's about. There was a set of stairs in a hill going from one level to another, but they were just rocks in a hill. And then the third thing was a picture over a fireplace of what looked to me like a little girl in a pink tutu. So I thought, how am I going to tell her this? This sounds crazy to me. So I told her, and I said to her, well, this is what I have for you. And she laughed and she goes, oh, okay, I know what that means. I said, oh, please tell me, because I have no clue what any of it is. She told me when her husband passed away, he had told her prior to that he wanted his ashes scattered. She didn't know where to put them. I didn't know her husband. I didn't know what he did for a living. He was a race car driver. He had a red car. So she said, I guess he wants him on the track. They lived in a house that he loved with where he put rocks in a hill so they could get up from one level of the yard to the other. So she guesses she wants part of him there. And the third one was she said, it's not a girl in a pink tutu. It's a picture over a fireplace in a house that we went to that belonged to his grandmother in Virginia or something that he inherited. And the little girl is wearing one of those pink floaty things. And to me, it was a tutu. Now, I didn't want to tell her any of that. It sounds crazy. It's like, am I making this up? I have no idea. But when I told her, she could put it all together. So I get messages, I see things. I don't know. People tell me I'm out there where the buses don't run. I don't know what to say. I'm
Certainly an interesting life. I concur with the idea that you can't, you just have to blab it out, because the energy's there. And then I've had some of that experience. Maybe it could be summarized when you say something and then you say to yourself, "Why did I say that?"
yeah,
Inside, you don't speak that out loud, but
right.
I think that's the other side giving you a little soul nudge and saying, like these needs to be said. But what you just described of this vision and then how you had the evidence that it fit in so many different places. Absolutely. I'm sure the wife was very happy to hear that.
She was. She said, I can't believe you knew all that. And I said, I didn't. This is the pictures that I got. Even in my own home, I can be a couple of weeks ago, I felt like one of my cats was in the room, passing through the room. And the next morning I get up and I make my husband breakfast and he sits in the chair and he goes, wow, that was weird. And I said, what? And he goes, I felt like I just sat on one of the cats. And I said, like I
Oh,
used to. And I said, well, maybe you did because she was here last night. And he looked at me and goes, what? And I said, and he goes, are you doing that weird thing? And I said, I guess. And he says, okay, she's here. So he's gotten used to it.
well, those are the best kind of kitty cats, the ghost cats, because
Yeah.
there's no kitty litter, there's no food, no vet bills. It's the perfect way to have
No
it.
hair, no nothing to clean up. Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so as we conclude the interview, tell me a little bit about before we go about a person comes and they sit around you and you do vibrational therapy. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so it's a massage table that they lay on. They're fully dressed. I put a blanket over them because when you're laying down, it gets cool no matter how warm it is in the room. I work on them with my hands over their body. I move down their body. doing that for probably 20 to 30 minutes. And then I start to play my quartz crystal singing bowls. And I have some that are frosted and they are on the floor because they're huge and they weigh a lot. And then I
Mm.
have some that are very small and they're clear crystal and I play them on their solar plexus. So once I play the bowls on the floor for about 15 minutes, I am guided as to which bowl to play. And if I decide to go outside of the guidance because I feel it's better, then the universe is telling me to play a different bowl. The bowl will squeal in a way that, so I've learned, don't go out, don't do it on your own. You don't know better, they do. And I follow the guidance. And then I play the bowl, the smaller bowls on them. So there's a total of 23 bowls. So I'm playing them on the people in order to get that vibration through their body, as I'm striking it. And then I ground them again with the energy therapy, and then I ask them how they feel. And after, they can come in for a half-hour session or they can come in for an hour session. And I mean, I've only had one person say it didn't work for me, and then he came back 6 months later because it did, and he didn't want to admit it.
Now, I've seen people like that myself and bumped into them. Like, when you touched me and I fell over, you pushed me. Or, that pain in my hand went away because I was, doing some gardening. I mean, they just can't accept it. Everybody, a good dose of skepticism is great.
Yep.
But when you have evidence yourself, it's kind of
Mhm.
like the aha moment. You want to say like, okay, how did she do that? And of course, that now they're on the past because that's the first question is how did you do that? Means you want to find out about it. And you have some cosmic experience, little whatever motivation that you can't explain. But if
Yeah.
you're truly on a spiritual path, you inquire. You don't just say, wasn't that interesting? What's for lunch? It's kind of like, how did they do that? So when you talk to people, I'm assuming they recommend you, and word of mouth is how people come to see you.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I did have to ask one gentleman to leave because
Oh,
when I put my hands on him, people will say, I don't know. And the minute you put your hands on them, you can feel they're accepting it. Their higher self is taking it because it's not up to them, it's their higher self. And this guy came in and said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I believe, I believe. And then I put my hands on him, he didn't believe. And I worked on him for 10 minutes and I said, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work. I'm going to ask you to leave. You're either skeptical or you're checking me out to see if it's real. I don't know what it is, but you're blocked everywhere. You're not allowing the energy to go in. And he said, well, I can't believe you're kicking me out. And I said, well, I'm not kicking you out. I'm just saying it's not working for you. But yeah, why waste your time and mine? And he said, I'm not going to pay you. And I said, oh, no, I'm not asking you for money. It's not, you can, just go. So he left. He came back about 8 months later because he went to 3 or 4 other people. And finally, on the last person he went to, she said, hey, have you gone to T Love? And he said, yeah, I went to her first. And she said, well, why didn't you stay with her? She's really good. And he said, I can't believe you're saying that. And she said, what happened? He said, she kicked me out. And she goes, oh, I know why.
ah,
And then he came back and he said, she made me come to you. And I said, all right, I'll take you. But this time, if I can't get in and I have to kick you out, you are paying because we both know how you are. So that was fair. And he did. And he still comes here.
he just wasn't ready the first time. He had to take that little detour around the
Yeah,
neighborhood to come back and
which
learn
is
what he
fine.
was learning.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's okay. I don't care. There's enough for everybody, right?
absolutely. Everybody at time and their place as well. Listen, it's been a delight talking to you. How can people get a hold of you again? What's your website?
quantumwellness.org and sojikids.org. Those are the best ways. Thank you so much. I really had a wonderful time. I appreciate you having me on. I feel honored. Thank you.
And so did we. It's a pleasure to have you here. So, everyone, we want you to remember you'll see this interview and spread it around to your friends on social media. Thank you for joining us on the Soul Report. We hope today's conversation has enriched your journey and ignited new perspectives for you. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspirational stories and follow us on your social media channels. Until next time, keep nurturing your spirit, seeking knowledge, and spreading positivity. Farewell, and remember, the growth of your soul is the most exciting journey you can embark on. I'm your host, Douglas James Cottrell, and my producer is Jack Bellick, and we're here today with T Love. God bless everyone. Until next time. peace and prosperity.